Morning, everybody. Welcome to a Peel Yourself Off the Mat edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest, and we're very happy to have you with us here for the program as it's Inauguration Day. And perhaps we should be inaugurated into the Degenerate Frustration Hall of Fame. I don't know that I've seen this circumstance pop up ever before, but where you have not one, but two backdoor pushes occur on the same divisional playoff weekend. I can't imagine it's ever happened before. This would put it in the category of being unprecedented. And it started out on Saturday, where you're tempted to think that, considering that the Houston Texans were not only going to be going against a team that essentially was 15-1 under Mahomes, and even though they lucked out in a lot of games this year, Kansas City, they weren't all that bad against the point spread. I think they might have been 1 under 500 on the season for the degenerate gambler out there that was backing the Kansas City Chiefs. And there was a theory, and I'm not sure how applicable it is anymore. I haven't really tracked it. But there was a theory many years ago that if you bet against the defending Super Bowl champion in every game that they played against the point spread the following season, that you would just have an annuity for yourself, that they were going to be several games under 500 every year against the spread because of the tendency to think, oh, yeah, well, they're the Super Bowl champions. And there's a tendency then to go ahead and overbet them, right? Everybody thinks the Chiefs are going to win the game. So why not lay any hideous number of points, which in my case, it turned out to be 9. And this was only in a personal betting venture that I've been involved in. I've mentioned it a few times here on the show on Bury Your Bookie, where a friend of mine just sends me whatever it is that he likes, and I have the other team no matter what. I have no say in it. I don't bother analyzing it too heavily, except my one complaint has been that the lines that he presents to me are, less fugazi than they used to be, but they do look like they came out of some monthly publication like the Jewish Journal. And like the old days of the Racing Form, where you used to look at the Daily Racing Form, and for some reason they felt compelled to put a couple of news headlines underneath whatever big was going on at the time. So you might see a headline that says, Secretariat to run in Belmont. Japan surrenders to end World War II. And I'm like, what? It's yesterday's news tomorrow. And that can happen with point spreads, and it's particularly frustrating when it does. Because you're sitting there thinking, well, geez, everybody else in the world is laying 8.5. I'm laying 9. Why is that? So you get into this Kansas City game, and here's Houston just barely hanging on for a while, and then it gets to the point where it's an 11-point spread, minute and a half to go in a ball game. Houston gets its field goal attempt blocked, and anybody that was laying 8.5 points is thinking, okay, I've got this one. I am now in a lock situation. And those that were laying 9, which in my case, that was the number, are thinking, is there any way that this can possibly blow up in smoke? They were going to whittle the time down, which they did, to fourth and forever, with 15 seconds to go in a game, deep in their own territory. Now the logic would dictate, but I didn't think of this in advance. The logic would dictate that you go ahead and take the safety, even from like the 12 or 13-yard line, wherever they were. Go ahead and take the safety. And they didn't do it. You're thinking they didn't do it egregiously. I mean, you can't think that there should be an investigation that Andy Reid might have had money riding on the Houston Texans to cover 9 points in the game, because logic dictated the play. It was just a piece of ornery and absolutely hideous bad luck. I'm thinking the guys that were online with the Kansas City Chiefs, and they were laying 9 points, and they're ready to cash their tickets because they're up 11 and there's 15 seconds to go in a game. The ashen white faces that they left the sports book with, as the people that were running the sports book are saying to themselves, well, it's unfortunate, but we ain't paying nobody. Nobody wins in this one. So you had a backdoor push there, and then it happened again yesterday. Just such ugliness. It happened again as you had the Philadelphia game. And that ends up in an ugly backdoor push as Jake Elliott misses the second of 2 missed extra points with what would have been an icing on the cake, absolute spread clinching touchdown by the Philadelphia Eagles late in the ball game, and you're thinking the Rams probably come back, prevent defense in the snow. It's not going to stop much. They're probably going to come back and get a score. It would be advantageous for the Eagles just to let most of the time evaporate off the clock, so it becomes impossible for them to get a second one. But that missed extra point, of course, backed us into a push in that ball game. So you had two games that ended up in a backdoor push. I think that's unprecedented. I'm going to bring in Mike Jones here in a sec, and he'll help us analyze that because if anybody would have researched such an absurdity, it would have been Mike Jones. So he's going to. I want to tell you that if you're betting, we got the college championship game tonight. We'll get some analysis on that from Mike as well. Bet Online continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for all online betting. They're very reliable, too. I mean, this isn't some boiler room in Guam where you're calling a guy and saying, hey, Pedro, I said the Chiefs. Doesn't work that way with these guys. They're very professional. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action, the ability to watch the games as they happen. They have the largest selection of odds on virtually everything, prop bets. You can go bananas there at BetOnline. BetOnline, the place to go. The most generous bonus programs also. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, let me bring in my buddy here, Mike Jones, who was kind enough to agree to come on the program today because there was so much to discuss, and we were texting back and forth wildly during the ball games. I love your crazy theories and some of the stuff that you come up with. It makes the game and enhances it greatly, almost as much as having money on a game. And for the uninitiated, they wouldn't be inclined to watch this show, but let's face it, if you put $1 on any aspect of any ball game, its interest level ratchets up exponentially, does it not?
Absolutely.
And it brings out both the best and the worst in you. I really think it does. But anyway, how are you, Michael? Thanks so much for joining us on this. We've got a great day here. As I said, Inauguration Day.
Mm-hmm.
We get inaugurated into the Futility Hall of Fame when it comes to degenerate gambling and the college playoff to decide. How are you doing, my friend?
Good. All day NBA, and you got Martin Luther King holiday. It's just pretty great, pretty interesting day. I can go back 4 years ago to me not really wanting to get involved with the presidential election. I go out and play golf and got my second hole in one on Inauguration Day. Yep, that was pretty cool happening. So Inauguration Day does have something special for my golf game moving forward. But, yesterday was just something to watch, I mean, Baltimore loses the turnover battle for the first time. Lamar turns it over multiple times in the game for the first time. We talked about this last week, that who the pressure was on felt like it was a little bit more on Lamar. But when you go look at the stats, 7 yards per play, and Derrick Henry touches the ball only 16 times, less than a third of their plays. You wonder, just really, could they have done more? Andrews dropping that ball in the end zone is just heart-wrenching for him.
Yeah, that's what I look at, though, as an overriding factor in these kind of situations where sports talk guys are going to dissect the game and analyze all the minutia and what does it do to Lamar Jackson's legacy.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, I mean, that was a Jackie Smith moment. Mark Andrews is a great tight end. I mean, this guy was a dynamic force for the Ravens. Yes, Henry probably and Lamar Jackson maybe neck and neck 1-1A in terms of overall importance. Jackson maybe a little bit more because you could find other backs. It's not easy to find a quarterback with his multiple talents. And there is, of course, the choke factor, which a lot of people are going to be pointing to, where especially a very, very good friend of mine who, wow, I mean, you would have thought that he had just finished a copy of Mein Kampf as he was talking about Lamar Jackson in terms of blowtorching money at this stage of the postseason, which he's done every year. But I don't know that you can blame him. I mean, when a guy drops a ball where you're about to tie the game, it doesn't necessarily mean that Baltimore was going to win the game. That would have been a toss-up at that point also, probably going to overtime. But nonetheless, I mean, he did put the ball in a guy's hands, and in spite of whatever happened earlier, a fumble in those conditions, can you forgive it? Pick, maybe. I mean, it wasn't the most favorable thing. Josh Allen, though, I mean, when you look at his numbers, and this guy's going to get all the credit, and probably deservedly so, that I mean, he throws for 127 yards in a game.
Yeah.
If you had said that before the ball game, you would have thought the Ravens win. But the turnovers, as we saw with the Detroit Lions, way too much to overcome. But all right, so I mean, it sets up an interesting matchup where you're going to have Buffalo now going to Kansas City. And Mike, I don't know how you felt about this, but I mean, the Zebras in this ball game.
Yeah, I was
needing to launch an investigation into that. Is it not with Mahomes?
Yeah, I was in a public place watching the game, and it was really interesting when those flags started flying. The reaction of everybody in the room, and I watch every game, so I analyze it through and through. And yeah, does it look like he's acting a little bit? The helmet shot from Will Anderson up the middle kind of missed. He turns his head. The referee doesn't get a clean look at it, throws the flag. Play on the sidelines. The one that was really embarrassing was at the end when he fell down. Do they go to a flopping rule in football? Maybe. Oh, who knows? But yeah, it looks like that. But then last night I was watching this again. There was a guy from Right Angle Sports who came out with a video of all the facts of all the penalties. And he said it got 3 million views. And he was explaining this not to be controversial because he didn't put his name on it, but just stated the facts that the penalties and rules of fourth quarters don't really favor Kansas City. But it's really hard to believe because it seems like every big play and every big penalty that comes out of their drive savers, it's Mahomes. Yeah, it was weird, but the reaction among everybody was, to your point, Jeff, was everybody in the bar was like, wow, he gets another call. He's getting this, he's getting that. And it makes you think that this is the effect it's having on the bettor or the fan or all that. It's an interesting story.
It's starting to look bad. It really is. So, you would think based on what we've seen this year with Kansas City, in spite of the fact that until they just tanked the last ball game of the season, that they were 15-1. So, the old cliche applies. Mm-hmm. They found ways to win one way or another. I think also with a very beneficial, we know all superstars are going to get favorable calls for the most part. Right. When it becomes so blatant and so egregious, and with the amount of money that's on the line now, what would you say? Exponentially, how much gambling fuel is now part of every NFL week. And why else would they have sold out to gambling interests, the National Football League? Remember, we were talking about this last week when you were on the show. It was so taboo, they had a fucking sign on the locker room. Sure. You bet, you're out of here.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where I think the 2018 passport law, which, the thing I'm working on that comes into play because of the legalization of sports betting, has helped both, I think, all sports. Getting that extra interest. I don't know if the quality of the game, the way it's being played now, not to break the subject, but if you're watching basketball, you're watching a completely different product since Larinaga left than you are watching now. And it's like, do they play? How the NIL works, all this. It all came together because of legalization of sports betting and how they were going to change the games in this way. And in this case, you're wondering, what do they want? Who are they doing it? Who's involved? What do they know the sides? What is the league getting paid? You just don't know, and you hate to even put that premise on anything, but it's just, this is what happens when you get everything in and bring all the money in.
No, it's crazy, and it only exaggerates whatever appears to be official favoritism. And with Mahomes, though, that's been tracked for some time. Right. It was pretty wild. All right, in summation, there, looking at the 4 games, let's take them apart here just real quickly, one at a time. Right. Philadelphia Rams. I talked about the ugliness, and I texted you before when Jake Elliott missed that extra point. I said, backdoor push.
Right. Yeah. You look at the game and this is what happens. Guys, Barkley breaks that run. You're thinking, should he go down? Does he stay up, take 2 minutes off the clock? He breaks the run with 4 minutes. They get the answer. They get the stop. And now they're on the 20-yard line going in for the win at the end. This is the way a lot of these games used to happen with the onside kick now that it doesn't work as good as it used to. I think these games don't get, caught up in the transition of the win-loss as much as they did years back. So if you have a little lead with 2 minutes to go in the game, you're usually pretty safe now. I think they made the stat yesterday, 5% of the onside kicks are recovered by the kicking team. So, but, Matthew Stafford's a dangerous player, and it comes down to that whole point. And again, thing I talked about last week, Jeff, the line moves. That line went from 5.5 early in the week, stayed on 6. That's what I made my pick on the podcast, so I got a push. And then it goes to 7 on game time yesterday. So if you take the Ram bet, hang in there and wait, and that's what you caught a break. So yeah, so it's tough. That game was so interesting, and the weather made a change. The weather helped Philadelphia, and you might say the weather helped Buffalo yesterday. But it's an old school type kind of look to football that we always want as a fan. Like the modern day younger kid has not really seen these weather games come into prominence, but my wife always reacts to a weather game and always glue in to a snow-filled game. And this is the way we grew up. This is the way football was played yesterday, the way it was played back in the 70s, 80s, when the weather became an element that a player had to overcome. And that won't be the case tonight with Ohio State and Notre Dame as they're playing in a dome, but those make these games interesting, and you're going to see possible weather this week. Although I don't see anything bad, but game in Philly, game in Kansas City, weather could be an issue.
It won't be like they're playing at the Orange Bowl, and
No,
that's for
no.
sure. I can hear John Facenda as you were speaking. These brave young men. There was a steel gray day at Lambeau Field, and
Yeah,
you're one of your favorites,
yeah.
longtime Giant. Although he was a cast-off, right?
Hmm.
Chuck Mersine
Yeah,
is the guy that was kind of sparking the drive down the field by Green Bay
yeah.
in the famous Ice Bowl game.
Yeah.
Jerry Kramer made a living off of that one
Mhm.
block. Jethro Pugh
Right.
goes into the second row. Bart Starr, quarterback sneak. Steve
Hmm.
Sarkisian, did you miss this game? What the fuck
Right.
were you thinking?
Yeah.
Pitching the ball
Yeah.
backwards. This is the way you do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of adverse conditions, and I don't know, to what extent. I would imagine under players are largely influenced by it, although
Hmm.
it can work both ways. Where you're
Yeah.
looking at defensive backs who are unable to cover anybody,
Right.
and yet, and it appeared like early in that game when it got off to a 7-7 start, the Buffalo game, it appeared that the over players were going to be dancing in the streets. I think that game might have fallen slightly under, didn't it? What was
I
that?
know it actually. I gave it out at 51 and a half. It was 51 and a half yesterday. So 52, you got a little lucky as I did yesterday.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the beginning of the ball game, you were ready to go out and light up a cigar and
Sure.
start
Yeah.
gargling.
These games, you get 31 points at the half. You figure you're all right. And then Buffalo only comes up with 2 field goals in the second half when it looked like Baltimore was taking over the game. And, it was, lucky win for sure.
Yeah. All right. So it sets up the next round. Now we want to get into the college football playoff game
Right.
also, and it seems like, I mean, how many times have you done it, Mike Jones? How many times have you started from scratch? Where you had to just wipe the slate clean and take the first steps forward as if nothing had ever transpired in the past.
Yeah.
But both of these teams find themselves a little bit in that situation. Much more recently for Ohio State when they lost to Michigan, and you would have given them 0.0 Plutarski chance of winning the national championship.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame, when they lost to Northern Illinois, I mean, think about it. Marcus Freeman, who's being heralded as a guy that might be the next coach of the Chicago Bears, although I don't know if that's going to transpire, and
Interesting.
seems like a bit of a long shot, doesn't it?
You sure?
You would have to be getting a price on that if that was going to be something you were going to bet. But this guy was being crucified. He was held in the same light of distinction as Jerry Faust at one point when he was losing to Marshall and then loses to Northern Illinois. So both of these teams essentially started from scratch. Notre Dame earlier in the season, not playing necessarily top flight opposition all the way, but they have won a couple of playoff games now. And Ohio State, of course, losing to Michigan and then immediately flipping a switch and turning on two annihilations before
Yeah.
they ended up last week, maybe getting a very, very good stroke of luck as they escaped Texas, largely because of that play we alluded to with Sarkisian pitching the ball backwards from the half-yard line on a second down.
Yeah, I have an acquaintance that's a board on the board of trustees at Ohio State, and the story was Ryan Day was in trouble after the Michigan game, and the team rallied around him, and they've showed it playing elite games right now. Probably the hottest team you'd have to say in this tournament. Have the talent to go win this game for sure. You know, they've responded. And I like the competition they've beaten. They avenged the loss to Oregon. They dominate Tennessee, and I thought for the most part the Texas was smoke and mirrors to stay in that game. A couple weird play calls on the goal line probably changed that game a little bit. But yeah, the big question is this: can Notre Dame withstand the pressure Ohio State's going to apply, and can they move the ball consistently enough on their defense? The upside of this is I think Riley Leonard, of all the quarterbacks they're facing, is probably playing the best, offers a huge dual threat, bigger issue to have. Notre Dame has been very good up front. So I think that'll be the challenge, how Notre Dame can move Ohio State around a little bit. Ohio State's great in the secondary. Notre Dame struggled a little bit in the passing game against Penn State. I don't know that they're going to get anything in the passing game against Ohio State. So it's going to be Riley Leonard making the big plays and becoming that Irish folk hero. Going back to the Rick Meyer days or the Joe Theismann days, can he drive this team to victory, put him on his back, and then for Ohio State, don't turn it over. Will Howard be consistent? I think they're the better team. I think I'm intrigued again by these line moves. I immediately think Ohio State, a 10-point favorite, comes out at 9.5 and it's dropping. That could be fun money. That could be the people like the underdog in this spot, the Notre Dame national, appeal. Where did this line come from? What are you watching that I'm not missing that this line was going to drop. I mean, they covered -6 against Texas, which I think was clearly a better roster than Notre Dame's, and they win by 14. Where does this fall? So I would be surprised if Notre Dame won tonight. My money's on Ohio State -8.5. I might take it down to 8, just in case it becomes a one-score game to get a push. Yeah, I just think Ohio State's a better team. I think they're playing well enough now, and I think they might be too much for Notre Dame in the spot.
On Ryan Day, when he cleans up, I was watching an interview with Freeman and Ryan Day with Chris Fowler on ESPN, prelude to the ball game. Doesn't he look like he'd be coming out in like a Chippendale show?
Yeah,
see his
green beard. Yeah,
amazing the turnaround there. If he ends up winning a national championship, I think what was Notre Dame. What were they before the season?
Oh, God, it'd be 50. I mean, people thought they could make the playoff because of the schedule, and they did. But the bet would have been after the Northern Illinois loss, you probably could have gotten 500 to 1. Thinking that they weren't going to do anything. So exactly. Hindsight is 2020 in that angle. But yeah, I just the schedule worked out for them because some of the teams that normally were always posing a threat didn't really pose that threat. A one-loss team, a Notre Dame national appeal one-loss team, is going to get there, be in the tournament. Both these teams aren't in if it's a 4-team tournament for sure. So this might be the appeal moving forward of this 12-team tournament that you might get a little bit of an outside. I think they got to redo the home field, the buys and all that stuff. But I kind of like this whole setup that they went to 12 teams. It's very interesting.
Yeah, much better. You end a lot of the horseshit debates that you used to have sports talk radio for many, many years, and they finally expanded it to 4, which didn't seem unreasonable, and it created a lot of excitement. Long extension to the college football season. Yeah. As we have the final game of the college football season tonight, Mike Jones inclined to say, hey, go ahead and lay 8 and a hook with Ohio State in this particular battle. Any feeling about the total in this ball game? It's weird, Mike, and like I said, all school here. Because we're talking about the side and the over-under, maybe, as an extension of the degenerate, line of thinking, where one thing is just not good enough to do. And everyone you talk to, you ask them, hey, you put any action on any of these games? They don't even mention the side or the over-under. Yeah. I mean, are we just going off into a sordid path here as the geezers at Caesars? Because I'm talking to a neighbor of mine, and all he had were prop bets.
And I was sitting with a guy who that's all he does bet, fantasy football guy. It's really how FanDuel and DraftKings have taken over. They were fantasy sports companies,
right?
And made a huge living doing it. Now they go out into this mecca and they become still using their props. The same game parlay that all the advertisements you see. Well, it's sure not playing your true odds. Once you put the over touchdowns and the over in the game together, they're going to pay you like you're betting a favorite and laying a money line. It doesn't work to do that. So that's how they're saving their money. So it's all these different things. But if you have a better chance to win to the public better, if I put Will Howard scores 2 touchdowns and the over 46 and Ohio State covers, I might only get $150 for my 100, but most likely I win the game if one of those things happen. So it makes you feel like a little bit better. But yeah, I just think the whole angle right now is, the live betting has become a huge portion of their business. I think at one point I read that where 70% of the bets are being made with the game and active
during the game
activity. Okay. Yes. And I think the props are always going to be huge, at this point. But yeah, for the old school guy, like the guys that we talk to, they're not really concerned with that. But you're our age, probably 10 or 20% are playing them, but the younger kids at 70 or 80% are into them. So it's where the business is headed for sure.
It's great. You don't have to care who wins.
Yeah.
You don't have to be right. There's such pressure on handicappers to come up with the right side, not look like fools sitting there burying everybody. The direct opposite of what the intention of Bury Your Bookie would be. But
let me give you an example yesterday. So I told you, you asked me about the Philly game, and you told me you liked the Rams, and I passed on the game.
Yeah.
Well, passing right. But you're 14, right, with the 13 points. That line comes out at 6.5, thinking that they're going to score. You think Rams are going to score. You could take a live bet and say, give me the Rams, plus the 6.5 now, or hedge out a bet at the end of the game, which you never could do before. Yeah. And you might lay 115, 120, but as the ball gets moved down the field, the line changes. Each play, something different happens. The total. Did you think they were going to score again? You could bet over 49. It's like these are the things that make the game so interesting. And I can remember talking to a guy who was, our age, that said with the new live betting after the Seminoles opened up, he said, I don't have to run home at 1 o'clock to bet the games anymore. I could sit down and turn the TV on at 1:30 and I make a bet. And I feel like I'm doing better picking the game when I get to see the first quarter. So these are all the different angles that we can get to these games that are different. For us old school guys and for my podcast, I'm picking the games because I'm not – if I was on a live show, I'd probably be giving out different things, giving analysis if we were watching the game together and videoing it and shooting this. But I gave out this week 5-0-1. I gave out the two totals over. I gave out the Commanders. You heard me say that and all that. But the Philly game, I probably got to push. Probably would have bet a live bet on it. If I was really digging into that form of betting. You don't have to push the bets. So that's what makes it fun and interesting. That there's so many different angles.
Yeah, and that made it time to strike. I mean, that's one thing I have some acumen for.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I'm, as usual, any degenerate gambler, especially a long-term guy like you or me, is fueled completely by self-sabotage. So why would I take advantage of going to bet online and betting that the Rams were going to put another touchdown on the board,
right,
and letting that reflect into a new revised total on the ball game, and cash in multiple times, maybe even parlaying all of this just based on the fact that you could sort of sense when Elliott missed that point after. I immediately sent you a text that said, okay, backdoor push here.
Here we go.
6 points. And it was a matter of moments later. You would have been elated instead of being completely deflated.
Yeah.
Because, a tie, literally, this guy, Eddie Erdelatz, who was probably around when we were first viewing football, he was a Navy coach in like the 50s. And he was supposedly, he's credited largely by for being the first guy to ever use that. A tie is like kissing your sister, and applying it to football. Probably more popularized by by Bear Bryant, Darrell Royal. But a push, for some reason, especially if you're beaten by a backdoor push, I don't know. That is one of the bigger knives in the back that you can take as a degenerate gambler, is it not?
Yeah.
Come on, the guy, what is he doing running around in the end zone there? You're screaming this in the City Houston game. What the fuck, Andy Reid?
You watch these games with different people. I was out in public. I usually don't do that. And I'm out with a couple guys I never met before. One a prop player, one a guy who has a, understands both ends of the business. And he basically said at third down, it's going to be a 9-point final. They're going to take the safety. And I'm like, what? I'm not even seeing it. And he called it right there. And I'm like, and then you see the punt and you see him go back.
You should have dashed your in-game betting.
Right. And so what I'm saying with 15 seconds to go is by the time you kick the ball, if it hits the ground and the guy returns it for a touchdown, the clock ends anyway. And punt returns take 5. You're not getting the top speed like you run the 40-yard dash in 5 seconds. It takes 7 or 8 seconds to get to the end zone. So by the time the ball gets in the air, he kicks it. He didn't really need to do that. So, but the reaction when it happened was you knew right away in the bar who had 8, who had 8.5, who had 9, who had 9.5. That's it, and that's what makes it interesting. And that was probably one of the talks that we sat and had. I laid 8.5, so it worked all right for me. Didn't bother me, but it was just it's a story now. And then you get that happen, and then I don't know how not to break the subject again, but I don't know how you explain the next game. I got all these books here. I'm still trying to figure out. One of them could tell me how Washington beat Detroit the way they did.
Unbelievable.
And that was one of the games I liked a little bit, and probably a lot because no one gave him a chance. And I just love. I told you I love the quarterback, and that's a game that you sit there and look, and it goes to Lamar Jackson. It goes to the Lions. Last year, the Lions played no games with zero pressure on them. Now they're the number 1 seed, and the pressure flips for the first time where now it's on them. And you could just sense a little bit as they had trouble stopping people. They suffered through major defensive injuries and the 5 turnovers. They won a game earlier in the year against Houston with 5 turnovers, and they do it there. And you just got to feel like they're going to have all their pieces back, and if they stay healthy, you got to love them earlier on to make a bet on them. But you're going to get a better price because now it's in everybody's head. The Lions are one of these snake bit teams like the Browns, and are they ever going to win? But the talent on that field told me that you get worried about a quarterback. This kid is a little different, and we were talking about this last night. I'm going to bring this up to the gamblers for this week when you're handicapping the Washington-Philadelphia game. In the history of the playoffs, there have been 5 players, rookies, quarterbacks that have started in the championship game and have all lost. Sean King in Tampa, and then in the more modern times, Ben Roethlisberger's rookie year in Pittsburgh lost to New England. Then you had Joe Flacco lost to Pittsburgh. And then you had Mark Sanchez of the Jets, and now you have Brock Purdy a few years ago in Philadelphia who got hurt, and that game got away from him, but everybody loved Brock Purdy. Here's the same scenario. Do I think this might be the best of all of them? Yeah. Do I think they have a shot? But I think that line's a little short right now. We're going to wait till later in the week before we give something out on it. But 4.5 is giving you the interest of people want to see Washington win. I think that line should be around 6.5. But yeah, that's how I look at these rookie quarterbacks and how they're going to do. But it's just his story is just tremendous. Seems like the kid's got that team going.
Good stuff all the way around, Mike Jones. Always a pleasure. I know a lot of people were going crazy with a variety of different ways of being in action over the weekend. So we'll have the results, a little review of the championship game. Ohio State, you're saying go ahead, lay 8 in the hook with Ohio State in this one. And if people are inclined to say, hey, wait a minute, man, this guy is fucking fascinating. Where can I find more of his helpful advice? Where would they go?
5-0-1 in the pros this week. Big Gunner podcast. We're going to talk a little Giant reaction to Saquon Barkley a little bit, and we're going to evaluate our team moving forward, and we're going to pick all the games and talk a little bit about each result and obviously the championship game tonight. So the Big Gunner podcast on Spotify.
How does Joe Shane get a wink of sleep last night after watching Saquon Barkley? When a guy goes down, gives Daniel Jones $160 million, he's riding the pines for another team. And Saquon Barkley essentially, I mean, you would have to say we're seeing what I think is a somewhat perceivable decline with Jalen Hurts overall.
Right.
He's constantly getting hurt now, and it looked like he was sort of, nursing an injury in that game yesterday, late in the ball game. Yeah. This guy lights it up. Ends up carrying a team, much like Derrick Henry had helped Lamar Jackson immensely. I don't know that there was a bigger asset to a quarterback this year than Saquon Barkley was to Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. And here's Joe Shane, just literally like, smelling his own farts in an elevator as he's thinking, wait a minute, I could not have made a bigger blunder, could I?
Now, the big story is this, and this is what I think is going to help the league moving forward. Going into these years when they had these top free agent backs, Jacobs, Henry, Barkley, all looking for big contracts, and then they weren't getting signed right away, and everybody was sitting there, what's the value of a running back? Oh, they get hurt, longevity, all that. All that is analytical. These old school GMs that have an idea what they're doing, football coaches, know what happened. Howie Roseman of Philadelphia has done a great job as a thorn in my side as a Giant fan, came right at the one guy that could change their team. And they have a line that when you get behind those big guys that Philly has, he's a different runner. He's going to the line with confidence. He's going to be a block. There's going to be a hole open up. Look at it. He had a 70-yard run and a 60-yard run yesterday. He runs for 205. So the other 20-something carries, he's only going for 60 yards. This is what happens to the guy. But when you have that burst, that last TD run, 2 guys had an angle on him. They were 5 yards ahead of him, and he ran right by him. And this is what I saw his rookie year, and the talent that this kid has. Joe Shane made a valuation. He said, you know what? I'm not going to have a $40 million quarterback handing it to a $12 million running back. And that quote is going to stick with him forever. And I think what happens is when you think like that and you don't think of culture, the kind of character this kid has, immediately when he went to Philly, I said on my podcast, this is a major headache for the Giants because they're in a division. Now we have another headache in Washington with Daniels. But it's like, this is what happens. So no one's talking about this, but I heard someone say it. Why not Saquon Barkley for MVP? Everybody wants Allen or Jackson or the quarterback. Yeah. But this guy might be the MVP. I mean, he's totally changed the team, especially when, like you just brought up a great point. How is Hurts even surviving this?
Sirianni is serving up cheesesteaks somewhere at Gino's.
Yeah.
And, well, what do you mean you want cheese? Get the fuck out of here.
So that's really the big story to me with Philadelphia. And I think he could be a factor again, again in this game. I think, it's hard for me to not pull the trigger on Philly. But I think the country's going to be on Washington. I think if that line stays 4.5, Jeff, it's because people don't want to root for Philly and they want to root for Washington, root for the young kid and the nice story. That to me is what you'll see.
All right, we got to run. Mike, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for
Great.
joining us here. Mike Jones, ladies and gentlemen. And appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll join you again tomorrow. We'll have our review of the college championship game. If you're with Mike Jones, you're laying 8.5 with Ohio State. For Mike and all of the people at Greenlight Ventures, Bet Online, and NoFilter.net, I'm Jeff DeForrest. We'll see you next time, the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.